Chapter 14. Overnight, it seemed, the bushes along the creek wrapped themselves in gowns of the loveliest green in the world. Cottonwoods by the river and Father's young apple trees put out dancing clouds of tiny leaves. All over the hills that surrounded the Walla Walla Valley, the new bunch grass sprang up like emerald velvet. Red-winged blackbirds, mountain bluebirds, and bold speckled flickers darted through the trees and the tall ryegrass along the fences. Catherine thought she had never seen so lovely a spring. Mother explained that every year all the members of the Oregon Mission, unless they were ill, came together at one or another of the 3 stations for a business meeting, baptism of children, and admission of church members. If there were any candidates, the missionaries, especially the women, saw one another so seldom that the annual meeting was a reunion and social gathering as well. This spring, it was to take place here at Wailuku. Mother began house cleaning with furious energy, the way she said her mother had always done in spring. Every straw tick had to be emptied, washed, and refilled with fresh, clean straw, and extra ones prepared for guests. Every wall must be brushed down, every window washed, every piece of furniture polished, every floor cleaned to the last crack. The girls had never worked so hard in their lives, but when it was done, the house smelled so sweet and clean that it was worth all the work. The coming of warmer weather also brought activity outside the house, where Father and the boys spaded up Mother's garden so she could plant the flower seeds they had carefully saved from last year. Mama used to like flowers too, Catherine remembered, yet somehow this spring she found it hard to remember Mama and Papa. The younger girls never mentioned them anymore, not even Louise, who had cried for Mama every night for so long. Spring also inspired the immigrants who had spent the winter here. They were busily repairing and loading their wagons for the journey to the Willamette Valley. It almost seemed that everyone was leaving Wailuku, for the Indians too were packing up for their annual trek to the fishing grounds along the Columbia River, where the salmon run would soon begin. Catherine noticed that Frank spent all his free time at the mansion house these days, and she wondered if he might really be planning to go with one of the wagons as he had threatened. One night, Father was called away to the Umatilla to see some sick Indians, and Mother conducted evening prayers. Afterwards, Frank pulled Catherine away from the others, out into the warm darkness. "Sis, I am leaving tomorrow with the Howards." "Oh, Frank, no. I have to. I can't stand it any longer. Either the teacher or Mrs. Whitman. I can never please her, no matter what I do." "What does John say?" "I don't care what he says. The Willamette Valley is where Pa was going to take us, so that is where I am going. Don't tell Mrs. Whitman." "I won't, but please, Frank, don't go." She thought surely Frank would not leave, but when she came downstairs in the morning, he was gone. Mother immediately sent John and an Indian to look for him, but when they returned long after dark, they had not found him. In the morning, she asked John to go again, and again he came back without Frank. "I think he must have left with the wagons," John said. When Father came home and heard the news, he said quietly, "I've been afraid this would happen. I tried to tell the teacher." At the look on Mother's face, he stopped and did not mention the matter again. For days, the house seemed so empty and lonesome that Catherine felt as if someone had died. Only now did everyone seem to realize how much Frank's smile, his happy ways, and light-hearted mischief had meant in their daily life. The mansion house stood empty and deserted now. Nobody came to the house for food or medicine. No children ran screaming about the yard. The valley among the great hills became the lonesomest place in the world. Even the raucous shouts from the Indian camp would have been a relief, but they too were missing, and where the teepees had stood was only empty space. Nevertheless, Mother insisted they must go on with their usual work, so all were up early, toiling in the garden now that it was planting time. She gave each girl a small space for her own where she could plant whatever she wished, provided she would water and weed it herself. At first they talked to Frank every day, but gradually the void he had left seemed to fill in. Yet to Catherine something was always lacking. Often when she was stirring the soup for supper with the kitchen door open because of the summer heat, a shadow would fall across the doorway and her heart would jump in glad expectation. Frank! But it never was he. She wanted to go out into the hills and shout, "Frank, where are you? Why don't you send us a letter?" It was the silence that seemed so awful. When the weather grew warm, Mother said they might as well bathe in the river to save carrying water. Wearing their oldest dresses with nothing underneath, the girls followed Mother through the orchard to the river. Here, she told them, was where Alice had drowned, so they must be very careful. She selected a shallow place and waded in, ducked under, and came up shivering and laughing. With many squeals, the girls did the same. Even Henrietta was dipped, and they all ran back to the house for a quick rub-down before the good dinner Mother had left simmering on the stove. Now, wasn't that fun? She asked. Elizabeth shivered. It was awfully cold. You'll get used to it and like it as I do. It was what helped me get over my illness last year. We'll bathe every day. During the spring days that followed, everything seemed so peaceful that it was a surprise when old Stickus, Father's best Indian friend, came riding up to the house one day and talked a long time. After he had gone, Father told the family what he had said. Some weeks before, a band of Cayuse, reinforced by a few Spokanes and Walla Wallas, had gone up to California, driving a band of horses to trade for cattle. Their destination was a place called Sutter's Fort on the Sacramento River. There, Stickus said, they had quarreled with some white men, and the son of the leading Walla Walla chief had been killed. The Indians had panicked, abandoned their horses, and fled. They were now on their way back with the intention of avenging the young man's death by killing 2 white men, Father and Archibald McKinley, chief factor of the Hudson's Bay Company at Fort Walla Walla. John and Perrin were greatly excited and began to overhaul all the guns on the place. One of them, John discovered, was the very gun Papa had owned that had been stolen from Mama and later traded to Father. For a moment, Mama and Papa seemed real again. Father said he could not blame the Indians, but he felt sure the cooler heads among them would have calmed them down before they reached Fort Walla Walla. Not a very good time to have a mission meeting, Mother declared. What if they kill us all? Father smiled and patted her shoulder. You don't know our Indians as well as I do, my dear. Just go ahead and get things ready for the meeting. 12 missionary guests arrived on the 8th of May. 5 were adults, the Ells and the Walkers from Shimikin, and Mr. Spaulding from Lapwai. Mrs. Spaulding's newest baby was too small to travel, so Mr. Spaulding brought only his daughter Eliza, who was about Elizabeth's age. The 4 little Walkers and the 2 Ells' children mingled joyously and noisily with the younger Sagers until the house seemed to be rocking. Since there was no one of Catherine's age, she spent her time taking care of Henrietta. After the meeting ended, Father made plans for his annual journey to Fort Vancouver to bring back supplies he had ordered from the East 1 or 2 years before. This year I am ordering a threshing machine and a corn sheller, he announced. The way people are pouring into this country, I'll need to raise a lot more wheat and corn. Hand threshing and shelling are too slow and hard. This year he would have a traveling companion on his trip, for Mr. Hinman had decided to leave the mission school for the Willamette Valley. Mother seemed sad to see him go, but the girls and John had difficulty concealing their delight when their tormentor actually mounted his horse and rode away. When Father returned from Vancouver, he told the children that he had called on Captain Shaw in the valley and had appeared before a judge who appointed him their legal guardian. So now that I really am your father, you must wear these things I have brought you. From his saddlebags came handkerchiefs, ribbons, and circle combs for the girls to use to hold back their fine hair. For the boys, there were new caps and pocket knives, and for all, delicious candy, horehound drops, lemon drops, and peppermint sticks. For the school, Father brought new books, slates, and slate pencils, and a wonderful big map of the world to hang on the wall. It was like Christmas in Missouri. Did you hear anything about Frank? Mother asked. I saw him and talked with him. He looked fine. But you couldn't persuade him to come back? I didn't try. He has to make his own decision. I told him we love him and want him, but I will not force him. Mother turned away, looking as if she would cry. He will never come, thought Catherine. Oh, Frank, will I ever see you again? Then, one day in the early fall, who should come riding up the road but Frank, looking taller and older than when he went away. He seemed a little cautious about coming into the house, but when Mother flung her arms around him and cried, Oh, Frank, I'm so glad you are home again, the scared look left his face. Not that there was no more trouble. But little by little, Mother eased her rules, and the feeling between them became less strained. One day, months after his return, he said, "Mother," then stopped. A surprised, happy look came over her face. "Frank, you called me Mother." He laughed. "It's as good a name as any, I guess."